The hospital room was silent and sterile, a cocoon of blank white walls, with the beeping monitors and dim lights that had become Yana's constant companions. At 5 years old, she didn't fully understand why her body had betrayed her, why her muscles ached and her bones felt like they were made of glass. The doctors had names for it: a degenerative disease, incurable, progressive, but none of those words held any meaning for her. All she knew was that her life was one of waiting. Waiting for medicines that didn't help, waiting for her parents who had stopped visiting, and waiting, always waiting, to be taken somewhere beyond this room. Then, one night, everything changed. Yana awoke to a soft hum filling her room, like a lullaby sung from the very stars. Blinking through the darkness, she saw 2 figures standing near her bed, bathed in an ethereal blue glow that cast strange, soft shadows across their faces. They were tall and otherworldly, unlike anyone she had ever seen. One was slender and graceful, his skin shimmering in delicate scales that seemed to catch and reflect light like prisms. His large, deep-set eyes were filled with a softness she'd never known. The other was taller, with a powerful, statuesque presence, his features carved with sharp, angular lines, his eyes deep and watchful, like twin black holes absorbing everything around him. Yana's heart should have raced, but she felt no fear, only wonder. The slender one, with the shimmering scales, leaned down and touched her forehead gently. His fingers were cool against her fevered skin, leaving a soothing trail as if drawing away her pain. "Starseed," he whispered in a voice that was both music and comfort, "we have found you." She stared up at him, her heart swelling at the sound of his voice, which vibrated with a warmth that seemed to seep into her bones. She couldn't understand what he meant, but something deep within her felt that this was right, as if she'd been waiting all her life for this moment. The taller one, who had yet to speak, gave her a solemn nod. His eyes were more intense, filled with something she couldn't quite place, something that felt like purpose. "My name is Laika," said the one with the soft, musical voice, kneeling down to her eye level. "And this is Rin. We are here to take you somewhere safe." She struggled to speak, the effort draining her as usual. "Safe?" The word slipped from her lips like a dream, too soft to be heard, but they seemed to understand. Laika smiled, a gentle expression that eased her confusion. Rin stepped forward, his voice deeper, resonating with a power that seemed to fill the room. "You are special, Yana. You are a starseed, a being who belongs to more than this single world. We have searched for you, waited for you." His eyes softened just slightly. "Would you like to come with us?" Though they spoke of things she didn't understand, she felt the truth in their words. She nodded, too weak to manage anything more. Laika's arms slipped beneath her, lifting her gently from the bed. She could feel his strength, firm yet tender, as though he were holding the most delicate of flowers. The machines beside her let out frantic beeps as she was moved, their alarms blaring into the empty hall. But Laika waved a hand, and the sounds dimmed into nothingness. As they moved toward the window, Rin pressed his hand to the glass, and it slid open in silent compliance, as if obeying his very thought. The night air hit Yana like a breath of life, cool and fresh, tinged with the scent of distant rain. She closed her eyes, drinking it in as Laika held her close, her small fingers clutching onto his strange, textured skin. She felt weightless, floating through a dark expanse that opened up as they drifted up into the sky. The stars stretched out before them, an endless canopy of light and wonder. It was only when they entered the dark, silent atmosphere of their craft that she realized she was leaving everything she'd known behind. The realization struck her with a pang of both fear and excitement. The spaceship's interior was warm and quiet, filled with a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. They placed her gently on a bed much softer than anything she had felt before. She watched in fascination as the walls shimmered, displaying landscapes she had never seen: oceans the color of sapphires, forests dense with crystalline trees, skies painted with more shades of blue and purple than she had ever dreamed of. Over the next few days, Laika and Rin explained what they could, piecing together small bits of a story that felt like a bedtime fable. They were travelers from a distant world, beings who had mastered both time and space in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. They told her about the starseed children, young beings they had come to guide and protect, those who carried the spark of cosmic mystery within them, binding them to more than one world. And, though they never outright said it, she began to understand that she had been chosen. Laika became her closest friend and protector, his voice a constant comfort, his songs like waves of warmth that eased her body's perpetual pain. He taught her fragments of their language, phrases that sounded like wind and rain, words for emotions she had never known. Asha, he would say as he touched her cheek, meaning love beyond the boundaries of worlds. And she would repeat it back, feeling the words settle in her like a promise. Rin was more distant but no less present, watching over her from afar, his eyes always filled with a quiet intensity. He taught her small skills: how to work the ship's strange, humming controls, how to focus her thoughts to calm her pain, how to channel her mind toward things beyond her broken body. But as days turned to months and months into years, Yana began to notice something unsettling. Her body, though strengthened by the strange energy they shared with her, still had limitations that seemed foreign to them. She would stumble, her legs failing her, or experience sharp pains that neither their songs nor their light could soothe. They watched her with worry, their whispered conversations growing more frequent. And though she was grateful for their love, a tiny shadow of doubt began to creep into her mind. What if she wasn't enough? What if her humanity, a frail, failing thing compared to their eternal vigor, was something they had not anticipated? One night, as she lay under the stars in the warmth of their ship, Laika sat beside her, his gaze soft but sad. He stroked her hair, his fingers brushing against her skin with a tenderness she hadn't felt in years. She looked up at him, questions brimming in her heart, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she held his gaze, feeling his sadness blend with her own. And as she drifted to sleep, she wondered what they had seen in her frail, human heart that made her worth taking in the first place, and how long that light might continue to shine if her body kept failing her. Yana was 12 years old when she first noticed the shift. Her body, which had once seemed almost revitalized by the alien energy Laika and Rin shared, began to betray her in small ways. At first, it was barely noticeable: a stumble here, a few days of intense fatigue there. But soon, the symptoms grew harder to ignore. Her legs grew weaker, and sharp pains lanced through her joints, forcing her to rely more and more on Laika's gentle support and Rin's swift interventions. The alien energy they transferred to her, which once sustained her effortlessly, now faded too quickly, leaving her drained and vulnerable. Yana tried to hide her fear, but it gnawed at her. She saw how Laika's face would crease with worry when she struggled to stand or when her hands trembled with fatigue. Rin, however, seemed colder, his watchful eyes filled less with warmth and more with calculation. The atmosphere on the ship, once so filled with love and security, began to grow tense. She could feel the distance between her and her guardians expanding, stretching like a taut thread ready to snap. One evening, after a particularly painful day, she overheard them speaking in their native language. She hadn't fully learned it, but she understood enough of their tone, the underlying emotion. Their words, usually soft and harmonious, were harsh and quick, like two storms clashing. She listened carefully, piecing together fragments through their musical yet sharp syllables. "Decaying vessel," Rin murmured, his voice a low growl. "She was never meant to last in this form." "She's not just a vessel, Rin," Laika replied, his voice filled with desperation. "She's our starseed. You know what that means to our people." "She was a mistake," Rin said, colder now. "An experiment, born of emotion, not logic. Look at her body can't hold our energy for long. She's falling apart. Every day, she grows weaker." Yana's heart clenched as she crouched in the shadows, feeling the weight of their words crash over her. A mistake. That's what Rin saw when he looked at her. She remembered the nights when he had taught her to focus her mind, the rare moments when he had offered her a silent nod of approval. Now, she wondered if any of it had been genuine or if he'd always seen her as a failure in waiting. Laika's voice broke through her thoughts, softer, pleading. She may be weaker, but she's still one of us. We chose her, Rin. We are responsible for her. Our mission was never about responsibility, Rin countered sharply. It was about survival. Evolution. And if we can't fulfill that mission with her, then we must let her go. Silence hung heavy in the air. Yana's chest ached with a pain that had nothing to do with her illness. She fought the urge to cry out, to demand why they were talking about her like she was some fragile, broken thing. She wanted to shout that she was still their starseed, still strong in ways they couldn't see. But her voice failed her, and she stayed hidden, trembling in the shadows, listening as they continued their argument. I know, Laika said finally, voice barely more than a whisper. But you don't understand, Rin. She is more than just a vessel. She has given me something I didn't know I needed. She is love. She is purpose. Rin sighed, his gaze hardening. Love is not purpose. We have come too far to let ourselves be bound by something as fleeting as emotion. I am only doing what must be done. She cannot survive much longer. And soon, neither will we if we drain ourselves trying to keep her alive. The conversation ended abruptly, and Yana slipped away, her heart pounding, her mind racing. For the first time since she had come aboard their ship, she felt truly alone. A heavy silence hung over the following days. Laika became more attentive, trying to hide his worry, but she saw the sadness in his gaze, a sorrow he could barely mask. Rin, however, grew more withdrawn, speaking only when necessary, his eyes never meeting hers. One morning, when the pains in her legs had become unbearable, Yana asked Laika, "Am I slowing you down?" He froze, his delicate, shimmering fingers tracing soothing patterns on her arm. His face softened, but a shadow of sorrow flickered in his eyes. You are our starseed, Yana. You are never a burden. You are Dash. Then why is Rin angry with me? She interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. Laika's lips parted, as if searching for the right words. He looked away for a moment, his eyes distant, filled with a pain she didn't fully understand. Rin is. Rin believes in our purpose above all else. He has known only duty and loyalty to our people. To him, anything that distracts from that is difficult. Do you think I'm weak? She asked, her voice breaking. Laika's face crumpled, and he pulled her close, holding her in his gentle arms. No, Yana. Never. You are stronger than any of us could have imagined. But she could hear the crack in his voice, a tremor that betrayed his own doubts, his own fears. Over the next few weeks, her condition worsened. She grew weaker by the day, her body failing her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Laika did everything he could to comfort her, his energy a balm to her pain, but she noticed he was growing weaker too. Even he was feeling the strain of sustaining her, his shimmering scales dimming, his movements slower. It was as if her pain was taking something from him as well, drawing his light, his energy, into her endlessly fragile form. Rin's demeanor grew colder, his presence looming but silent, as though he were waiting for something inevitable. He no longer interacted with her directly, choosing instead to speak through Laika. She knew he was watching her closely, calculating her every movement, every sign of weakness, as though he were preparing for a decision he had already made in his heart. One night, when Laika had fallen into an exhausted sleep beside her, she found herself lying awake, staring at the stars through the ship's curved glass windows. The vastness of space had always comforted her, a reminder that she was part of something larger, something beyond herself. But now, it felt cold, vast, and empty, a silent witness to the gulf that had opened between her and her guardians. Tears pricked her eyes, and for the first time, she allowed herself to cry, silently, without the comfort of Laika's touch or Rin's silent gaze. She cried for the world she had left behind, for the hospital room that had once seemed like a prison but was, in some ways, more certain than the life she now faced. She cried for the love she thought she had found, the bond that had once felt unbreakable. And in that moment, as she lay there in the quiet shadows of the ship, a question took shape in her mind. If they could abandon her, if Rin truly saw her as nothing more than a mistake, what would she become without them? Could she survive in this body, this failing form, if the very beings who had once filled her with life now saw her as an obstacle? But as she closed her eyes, the memory of Laika's touch lingered, a faint spark of warmth that reminded her of something beyond pain, beyond frailty. She was still a starseed, wasn't she? She could feel that energy pulsing faintly within her, like a slumbering fire waiting to be reignited. And though her body grew weaker, her spirit hardened with a quiet resolve. She might have been a mistake to Rin, an experiment gone wrong, but she was determined to prove that she could still shine even if it meant defying their expectations, even if it meant finding her strength in places beyond their reach. Yana's 15th birthday came and went with little fanfare, marked only by Laika's soft, melancholy songs and Rin's increasingly withdrawn demeanor. She could barely stand on her own now. Her legs, once braced by the alien energy Laika and Rin provided, had grown too weak to hold her. Her vision was clouded, and the pain came in waves that left her breathless. Yet, through it all, she clung to hope that Laika's care would be enough, that he could find a way to heal her. But Rin's patience had run thin. It happened one evening after a long, silent day of travel through space. They had landed on a remote forested planet, rich with towering trees that stretched into the sky like massive pillars. Their ship hummed softly, blending with the low, echoing calls of distant creatures. It was the first time in months that they'd stopped somewhere for more than a few hours, and Yana had hoped it was a chance for a brief escape, to feel the fresh air on her face and, perhaps, share one more precious moment with Laika under a canopy of stars. But as the ship settled into stillness, Rin turned to Laika with an expression Yana hadn't seen before. It was a look of finality, of resignation and, she realized with a chill, of resolve. "Tonight," Rin said, his voice unwavering, a stone sinking into the quiet of the room. "It has to be tonight." Laika's eyes widened, the gentleness in his face crumpling into panic. "Rin, no," he whispered, taking a step back as though Rin's words were a physical blow. "Not now. We haven't. We can't. We have no choice," Rin replied firmly. "She's deteriorating faster than we can sustain her. Our resources are depleting, and every day we grow weaker. You feel it too, Laika. She's drawing from us more than we can replenish." Yana, lying quietly in the shadows, listened with her heart hammering in her chest. She understood what Rin was saying, though every part of her wished she didn't. He was preparing to leave her, abandon her in this unfamiliar place, where she would have nothing but trees and sky and the ache in her bones. The pain in her heart overshadowed even her physical agony, twisting inside her like a knife. "She is still our starseed," Laika argued, his voice cracking with emotion. "She is a part of us. We chose her." "You chose her," Rin retorted, his eyes flashing. "I only followed because I trusted you. Because I thought you saw something in her that I could not. But all I see now is a body that is breaking, a spirit that will extinguish, and our mission slipping away." Laika turned away, his shoulders slumped, as though bearing the weight of 1,000 decisions. Yana watched him, a painful ache growing in her chest. She wanted to reach out, to tell him she was still here, that she hadn't given up. But her voice failed her, and she could only lie there, helpless, as the two most important beings in her life argued over her fate. "You're wrong," Laika said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Yana is more than you think she is. She carries something within her, something neither of us can understand." Rin sighed, frustration etched into his every movement. If she truly held any power, we wouldn't be watching her fall apart before our eyes. Laika's silence spoke volumes. He had no answer to Rin's cold, unyielding logic. And in that silence, Yana felt the faint, fading hope within her flicker. Rin turned to her, his gaze unreadable but firm. "Yana," he said, and for a moment, she thought she heard a hint of sorrow in his voice. "We have done all we can for you. We cannot keep drawing on our own life force to sustain you. Your human form. It is failing, no matter what we do. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to look at him with all the strength she could muster. So, you're just going to leave me here? Her voice cracked, weak and brittle, but her words cut through the quiet. Rin's gaze softened ever so slightly, but he didn't falter. This place, he gestured to the lush forest outside, it's teeming with life. It will sustain you far longer than we could. It's peaceful, and perhaps you'll find a way to connect with its energy, to use what remains within you. Yana shook her head, unable to comprehend. She felt Laika's gaze on her, his face stricken, torn between loyalty and love, between duty and the promise he had made to her so long ago. We will leave you provisions, Rin continued, his voice low. Enough to last until you find a way to adapt. We have faith that you will survive. You don't understand what you're asking, Yana whispered, her voice raw. I am not like you. I don't know how to survive out there. I trusted you both. The silence that followed was suffocating, filled with words unspoken and dreams shattered. Laika knelt beside her, taking her hand in his scales glistening faintly in the dim light. His touch was gentle, trembling. Yana, he murmured, his voice breaking. I am so sorry. She looked up at him, her heart torn between anger and despair. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't leave. Rin's face tightened, his gaze like iron. Love cannot change what is inevitable. We have given you all we could. And now, it is up to you. With one final look, he turned and left, leaving Laika and Yana alone in the dim, quiet cabin. Laika's face was streaked with what she could only interpret as tears, though they shimmered like fragments of light, falling from his cheeks and scattering in the air like dust. I wish I could change this, he said, his voice thick with regret. But Rin. He's right. Our energy is not limitless, and we're too far from our world to regenerate quickly. I don't know how much longer we can survive ourselves if we continue like this. So that's it? Yana whispered, barely able to contain the bitterness in her voice. You're just giving up on me? He leaned close, his voice a breath against her cheek. No. I am leaving you with a piece of myself. A small spark. You won't be alone, Yana. You'll carry part of my energy with you. It may not be enough to heal you, but it might be enough to survive. With a soft hum, he placed his hand on her chest, and Yana felt a warm, tingling sensation spread through her. It wasn't much, just a small ember, a whisper of the life energy he had once given her freely. But as his hand left her, she realized that this was goodbye. He lingered for a moment, his face filled with sorrow, then he turned and followed Rin. She watched as they boarded the ship, the door sealing behind them with a soft hiss. And then, with a flash of blue light, they were gone, leaving her alone in the vast, quiet forest, surrounded by towering trees and the calls of strange, unseen creatures. For a long time, she lay there, listening to the sounds of the forest, feeling the emptiness of their absence settle around her like a heavy cloak. She couldn't move, couldn't bring herself to even try. Every part of her ached, not just from the physical pain but from the knowledge that the two beings she had loved most had left her behind. But as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, she felt something shift within her, a faint spark, a lingering trace of Laika's energy. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, a reminder that she still carried a piece of him within her. With great effort, she pulled herself up, her fingers digging into the earth as she struggled to sit. She took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. And though every part of her was weak, something inside her held firm, a small, stubborn flame, born of pain and resolve. She would survive, somehow. She didn't know how, but as the morning light filled the forest, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would find a way, with or without them. As she sat alone, her eyes lifted to the stars, the faint pulse of Laika's. The first few days in the forest were a blur of exhaustion and pain. Yana crawled through the underbrush, her weakened body barely able to carry her weight. She rationed the supplies Laika and Rin had left behind, forcing herself to eat and drink just enough to survive. But soon, even these dwindled, leaving her to rely on her wits and the land around her. The forest was unlike anything she had seen on Earth or on the alien worlds she glimpsed from the ship. Towering trees stretched toward the sky like pillars, their thick branches entwining to form a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft, greenish glow. Strange creatures flitted between the trees, some small and delicate, others massive and lumbering, their eyes following her movements with a curious, silent awareness. The forest was teeming with life alive, breathing, humming with an energy she could feel in her bones. Despite her fear and the lingering bitterness from being abandoned, she felt a strange connection to this place, as if she had been destined to be here, alone among the trees and the shadows. At night, when the sky turned inky black and the stars blinked down at her like old friends, she would lie back on the soft earth, feeling the remnants of Laika's energy pulsing faintly within her chest. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest fell into shadow, Yana felt an overwhelming wave of despair wash over her. Her body was failing, her strength waning. She could feel Laika's energy growing weaker, flickering like a dying ember. Soon, even that last fragment of his love would vanish, leaving her entirely alone. As tears pricked her eyes, she clenched her fists, her fingers digging into the earth beneath her. I can't just die here," she whispered to the empty forest. "I can't let this be the end." And then, something stirred. A faint warmth spread through her hands, a gentle pulse, like a heartbeat. She froze, feeling the energy shift beneath her fingertips. It wasn't Laika's energy, it was something older, something raw and untamed. It was the forest itself, alive with its own power, reaching out to her, answering her silent plea. With trembling hands, Yana pressed her palms into the ground, closing her eyes and focusing. She had no idea how to harness this energy, but instinct guided her. She felt the pulse of life beneath her, the ancient, timeless force of the trees, the soil, the creatures that made the forest their home. It flowed through her fingers, seeping into her skin, filling her with a warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. Slowly, tentatively, she drew on the energy, letting it flow into her, filling the empty spaces left by her failing body. It was different from the energy Laika and Rin had given her, wild, untamed, but warm and full of life. She felt it seeping into her muscles, her bones, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through the dawn. Her limbs stopped trembling, her breathing steadied, and a sense of calm settled over her. She opened her eyes and looked around, seeing the forest in a new light. She could feel it, not just as a place, but as a presence, a vast, interconnected web of life that welcomed her, accepted her, as if she were a part of it. As the days turned into weeks, Yana grew stronger. She learned to harness the forest's energy, drawing on it to move, to heal, to survive. She became attuned to the rhythms of the forest, its silent language, the way the creatures moved, the way the plants bent and swayed in response to her presence. She discovered which fruits were safe to eat, which plants held healing properties, and which creatures posed a threat. Her body, once frail and fragile, began to adapt. Her muscles grew lean and strong, her senses sharpened, and the constant ache in her bones faded. She no longer felt the sharp, stabbing pains that had plagued her for years. Instead, she felt a lightness, a strength she had never known. She was becoming something new, something neither fully human nor fully alien, a fusion of her own will and the forest's life-giving force. The nights became her favorite time. Under the starlit sky, she would sit by the edge of a quiet pond, watching the moonlight dance on the water's surface. The stars, once distant and indifferent, now felt like silent companions, each one a reminder of Laika and Rin, of the life she had left behind. But the pain of their abandonment had lessened, softened by the peace she had found within herself. One night, as she sat beneath the stars, she felt a sudden, familiar presence, a faint pulse, a remnant of Laika's energy that still lingered within her. It was almost like a whisper, a soft voice echoing through her mind. "You are more than you know," the voice seemed to say, gentle and warm, like Laika's hand on her cheek. "You are a starseed, Yana. A bridge between worlds. The light you carry is yours now." And as she listened, she realized that Laika had given her a gift far greater than life itself. He had shown her the spark that existed within her, the power to connect, to draw strength from the world around her. She was no longer dependent on them, nor on any single world. She was her own creation, bound to the stars yet rooted in the earth. With this understanding, Yana rose, feeling the pulse of life around her, the quiet strength of the trees, the whisper of the wind. She was a part of it all, connected to something vast and eternal. She walked through the forest with a newfound purpose, her steps light, her heart steady. The creatures watched her with respect, sensing the transformation within her, the shift from lost girl to something more, a protector, a guardian of the life that had sustained her. Months passed, and Yana became a legend among the forest's creatures, a silent figure who moved like the wind, whose touch could heal, whose presence brought peace. She had become more than human, more than a starseed. She was a force unto herself, shaped by the love she had lost, the pain she had endured, and the strength she had discovered within. One night, as she sat beneath the stars, she looked up, feeling the faint pull of something beyond this world, a reminder of the alien sky she had once called home. She wondered if Laika and Rin still watched her from somewhere among those stars. She wondered if they knew what she had become. And as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, casting golden rays across the forest floor, she whispered a silent message to the heavens. "I am here. I am alive. And I am free." With that, she rose, ready to greet the new day, a spark of light in her own right, a being bound to both earth and stars, but owned by neither. She was Yana, a girl who had found her place in the universe not as a starseed, but as a force of life, wild and free. In that moment, she knew she had finally come home.